Thank you. Thank you. My question is, we hear a lot more conversation. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Charlie Nelms, and I'm Vice President of Indiana University and from Arkansas.
Very well.
These days, we hear a lot of talk about diversity as opposed to equity. And I see people sort of squirming when they want to substitute diversity for equity. Why is that the case that you think we have such difficulty getting people to focus on equity as distinguished from diversity?
Yeah. One of the reasons I think is because our paradigm for inter-community relations is basically outdated. We started out with a sort of paradigm of equality of opportunity after separate but equal. And what we did is to get people access to the room, but not to get them around the table. And more people are now saying that they just don't want to be part of the numbers. They want to be part of the opportunities. And so we focused on numbers and making sure we have one of this, one of that, two of this, two of the other. But we haven't focused on eliminating the impediments, eliminating the barriers that keep them from realizing their full potential and being able to make a contribution to the institutions of which they are part. I mean, I was teaching in the 60s when we started forming Black Studies program and Black Cultural Centers. And I remember Black students coming to me and saying, you know, they feel like Physics 101 or something, the object of a learning experience for whites. And we were asking these 18 to 19-year-olds to be a teaching vehicle for the white students who wanted to learn more. And, you know, on the one hand, as an older person, and I wasn't very old in the 60s, but at least was the chaplain of the colleges, I could understand that, but it was difficult for them to understand it. And we have come some ways from that, but we still fail to understand what it is that people are really asking for. You know, we have thought that what we needed to do was to develop a sort of hierarchical pluralism when people were asking for an egalitarian pluralism. And that's been part of the problem. By hierarchical pluralism, I mean the kind of diversity which brings everybody together, but it's made clear to them that you have to approximate these norms and these standards of the dominant group in order to be considered fully human and to be able to fully participate. When what people are asking for is a recognition of their differences, but an agreement that those differences don't really limit and shouldn't limit their potential to realize their ability. But most people have wanted to do and to be what is called color blindness, in which they have assumed that the role should be to look at a person and who is black and not to see him as black, but somehow to see him as just fully human. That sounds wonderful, and I love it. However, because that person is black, he brings or she brings with him a psychological and social history that shapes and influences how they relate to the situations around them. And unless one understands that, one fails the opportunity to really appreciate and value difference rather than focusing on color blindness. I said the South Africans have as their major goal a non-racial society. And people say, well, how can you have as your goal a non-racial society and you use race in determining programs to eliminate racism? Well, it ought to be clear, as I said earlier, that if race created the problem, you're going to have to take race into account if you're going to resolve the problem. Now, I like to say that's transitional, and the ultimate goal can be non-racialism in South Africa, but you can't move from racism to non-racialism without an interim period of transition in between.
Ambassador, my name is Hikmet Kutlu. I've been in this beautiful country for 16 years, and Some may dismiss my observations as not valid because of the time span, but I'd like to share them anyway. The white guilt brought us to a point, rightly so and thankfully so, that we speak of diversity before we even know what it means. And it also brought us to a point where it would be a suicide for our political leaders or corporate or civic leaders to have any social, racially oriented remarks that would not be complimentary to everybody. Do you believe that this is the ripe time for the minorities in America to run with the ball and make the touchdown, in addition to all the advances they have made so far on their own? I feel like the milieu is real good for the minorities to make a move to make the touchdown.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by making the touchdown, though. Would you elaborate a little bit more?
What I believe is, just like the old saying goes, it takes two to tango. I mean, it's not a one-sided story. I mean, so far we suffered from the fact that the whites discriminated against the minorities, and the situation is changing now, and I feel that there may be some responsibility for the black leadership or minority leadership to seize the moment and to move forward instead of, you know, not associating with Bing Crosby or Colin Powell and thinking that, you know, they are too white-oriented. And am I making myself clear?
I think you are. I think I'm now beginning to understand you. What I would say to you is that if I was speaking to a group of black leaders, I might emphasize what needs to be done internally to deal with the problem while others were dealing with it externally. I was asked to talk about philanthropy and equity, and philanthropy is a dominant, basically an enterprise dominated by folks who trace their ancestry to Europe. And so I was basically talking about what I think we need to do together as folks in philanthropy. I didn't prepare this as a dissertation for black leaders on what they needed to do internally. I think Stokely Carmichael was right on this point when he said that there are things we need to do internally as blacks, and there are things we need to do externally. There are things we need to do separately, and there are things we need to do together. I was talking about those things we need to do together. Yes.
Good evening, Ambassador Joseph. My name is Jasmine Burnett, and I'm a graduate student at the Center on Philanthropy. My question centers around the impact of on diaspora giving, particularly in the African American community, to Africa, particularly South Africa in my case. And I'm curious about, you talk about the concept of a caring community. And in that community, you say the example or the model of that is that it fosters pluralism, social cohesion, and acting as a single community. So I'm curious as to how the enduring connection that results from that community is established when you actually quoted Gunnar Myrdal in The American Dilemma, and actually I want to question you on that as it relates to cumulative causation, where you have the stimuli and the response, unintended stimuli and response, and those things occur simultaneously. So not only so as far as African American giving and our integration into American society and our reconnections in diaspora giving, how do you feel the caring community has been established between African Americans and Africans?
Well, I I don't have any data on how much, and I hope you will be able to gather some on how much African Americans give to Africa. But I know that in the days of the liberation struggles in Southern Africa, a lot of us were giving a lot. I'm not sure that in the days of transformation, when the liberation struggles have already occurred, that folks have been responding as much as they responded during the days of the liberation struggle. But in order for that to be giving, there has to be a sense of community. There has to be some sense of connection. And in South Africa, there is a concept of community called Ubuntu, which is best expressed by the Xhosa proverb, people are people through other people. And the elders speak of a time when they said, your pain is my pain, my wealth is your wealth. Your salvation is my salvation is your salvation. And I think in order for us to enhance giving, there has to be a sense of connection, a sense of community. And so when we feel that sense of community, usually is when there is crisis. And once the crisis dissipates, the sense of community dissipates. And I think one of the problems we have in talking about giving is when the crisis is not as pronounced or not as high profile, people are not motivated to give as much as they do otherwise. That's why I talked about the difference between giving for relief and giving for reform. And so I think there has probably been a decline. And as I say, I don't have any data, but anecdotally, I think there's been a decline because they don't know exactly what to give to. And there isn't the crisis, the sense of connection that there was when the ANC and some of the other liberation groups